The marble floors of the Curia shimmer beneath torchlight. Senators stand in silence, their togas whispering like restless ghosts. Beyond the open doors, Rome hums with life. Vendors shouting, wheels creaking, distant prayers rising into the dusk. Inside, history trembles. The old republic stands on the edge of something vast and unseen. One man clears his throat, another clutches a scroll, and somewhere deep within those polished halls, ambition sharpens its blade. The Roman Senate, guardians of law, heirs of nobility, are about to lose the very thing they swore to protect. If the echoes of forgotten empires move you, join us, and walk these marble corridors again. LA Chapter 1. The Birth of Power. The year is 509 BCE. Dawn creeps over the 7 hills of Rome, painting the Tiber in molten gold. Smoke drifts from the hearths of farmers, from the forges of smiths, from the pyres of a dying monarchy. The city trembles not with war, but with awakening. Tarquin the Proud, last of the kings, has been cast into exile. His golden crown lies abandoned in the dust, and the people whisper his name like a curse. At the heart of the forum, a crowd gathers. Rough hands grip the handles of plows and spears alike. Among them stand the patricians, Rome's ancient families, their garments white but their intentions gray. They speak of liberty, of a new order born from the ashes of tyranny. And so beneath the open sky the Senate is reborn, not as servants of a king but as rulers of themselves. The air tastes of iron and uncertainty. The senators, now self-proclaimed guardians of the Republic, convene for the first time. Each man carries the weight of lineage and the ghost of ambition. The marble benches are still cracked from age, the floor uneven, the chamber dimly lit by torches sputtering in the draught. Yet to them it feels sacred, a temple of words, a place where destiny itself might be debated into being. Lucius Junius Brutus rises, his voice raw with conviction. No man shall ever again be king in Rome. The crowd echoes him, a chorus of defiance, of fear, of newfound pride. But even as they swear loyalty to the Republic, a subtle unease hums beneath their oaths. For in destroying the crown they have not slain ambition. They have merely scattered it among themselves. In the weeks that follow, the Senate grows in both size and self-importance. They appoint consuls, 2 men to share power, a safeguard against tyranny, yet already cracks form. The noble families debate who shall hold office, whose lineage deserves precedence, whose word weighs more in the forum. Behind closed doors, alliances form like storm clouds. Outside, Rome stirs with a hunger for order. Farmers return to their fields, soldiers to their garrisons, merchants to their stalls. But the people sense something, that though the king is gone, the masters remain. They watch the Senate from afar, wondering whether liberty is real or merely a new mask for old power. In the Curia, discussions echo late into the night. The senators speak of res publica, the public thing, the common good. But already the definition of public narrows. It becomes a word of marble, belonging to those who own the land. The wealth, the history. One senator, Gaius Valerius, writes to his brother, "The Republic is young, but its heart beats with ancient pride. We call ourselves free men, yet freedom, I think, has a price we do not yet understand." The wind howls through the half-built forum. Fires flicker in courtyards. Rome, that eternal seat of empire, is still a city of mud and stone, yet its senators dream in marble. They imagine laws that will last forever, victories that will outlive them all. The Republic becomes their creation, and in that creation their reflection. But pride is a patient poison. And in the silence after debate, when torches gutter out and the marble cools, the Senate's echo sounds eerily like a crown falling to the floor. The months that followed the fall of the monarchy were filled with noise, hammering in the streets, prayers in the temples, arguments in the Curia. Rome was rebuilding itself, brick by brick, law by law. Yet beneath the hum of daily life there lingered a tremor, the quiet question of who truly ruled now. By decree, the Senate became the Republic's spine. 2 consuls would lead the state each year, elected not by commoners but by the noble blood of the patriciate. These men would command armies, propose laws, and preside over judgment. The Senate's promise was equality, yet its practice was privilege. From the Aventine to the Palatine Hill, whispers spread. The plebeians, on farmers, artisans, soldier, began to murmur of injustice. "We cast out a king," one man said, "only to kneel to 100. They could feel the distance between marble and mud growing wider each day. Still, in those early years, there was hope. The Senate declared sacred festivals to the gods, celebrated victories against neighboring tribes, and built monuments to liberty. The sound of trumpets filled the forum. The air smelled of olive oil and sweat, of incense and ambition. In one of the surviving letters of that era, a nameless soldier wrote, "I have seen the senators in their togas, walking as though the gods had made the stones to carry them. Yet when they speak, I hear not divinity but men, afraid of losing what they cannot yet define." Inside the Curia, voices rose and fell like waves. Senators debated taxes, alliances, and the reach of their power. But beneath every argument lay the same question: who decides? Brutus, the man who had cast out kings, sat in silence more often now. His eyes, once burning with conviction, had grown tired. The burden of freedom, he realized, was heavier than the chains of tyranny. When he rose to speak, it was no longer with fire, but with sorrow. "We thought liberty would unite us," he said, "but liberty, it seems, is another word for desire. As Rome's borders expanded through war and conquest, so too did the Senate's pride. The Republic's victories became proof of divine favor. Each triumph added new wealth, new slaves, new lands. And with each conquest, senators began to see themselves not as servants of Rome, but as its masters." One evening, as the sun bled into the Tiber, a senator named Servius Cornelius stood before the statue of Jupiter and whispered, "We have traded crowns for curule chairs, but the throne remains." He pressed his hand to the marble god, cold and unyielding, and wondered whether the gods had truly blessed the Republic, or merely watched in silence, amused by man's illusions. The people celebrated Rome's victories with festivals that glittered through the night. Wine flowed, music echoed, torches flickered against temple walls. Yet in the Curia, another kind of ritual unfolded, one of control. Every decision, every alliance, every betrayal was written into the Republic's bones, and so, beneath the outward brilliance of early Rome, the Senate's identity took root, proud, unyielding, certain of its destiny, a body of men who believed themselves eternal. They had built a system to prevent tyranny, yet in its marble reflection one could already glimpse the faint outline of an emperor's shadow. Night falls upon the forum once more. Torches hiss in the wind, throwing long, uncertain shadows across the Senate's marble steps. The city that once trembled under kings now slumbers under the illusion of freedom. Yet deep within those stone halls something stirs, a quiet truth that even the gods seem reluctant to name. Rome is no longer a city of men who fear tyranny. It is a city learning to love its own power. By the middle of the 5th century BCE, the Senate's authority is absolute in all but name. Decrees flow from its chambers like rivers, shaping every corner of the Republic. The senators speak of virtue, of service, of the sacred duty to Rome, yet each word hides a private ambition. Beneath the white folds of their togas, envy festers like a hidden wound. Outside the Curia, the plebeians grow restless. They toil on lands they do not own, fight in wars they do not profit from, and pay taxes that never ease their hunger. The Republic's promise of equality has become a whisper, soft, fading, almost forgotten. It is in these years that the first great rupture appears, the conflict of the orders. The people demand representation, a voice in the laws that govern their lives. The Senate resists, fearful of losing control. For the patricians, Rome's destiny is theirs alone to guard. For the plebeians, Rome is theirs to reclaim. The tension is not shouted but simmered. Streets grow uneasy. Markets grow quiet. One morning, the plebeians simply walk away, abandoning the city, their tools, their posts. They march to the sacred mount, refusing to return until justice is promised. From the Senate steps, the marble still gleams, but its echo feels hollow. Inside, the nobles debate how to respond. Some call it treason. Others call it truth. A younger senator, Tiberius Virginius, stands and says, "They have done what we could not, reminded us that Rome is not the Senate, but the people." His words hang in the air like incense, sweet and dangerous at last. Compromise is born, reluctant, imperfect, but monumental. The Senate grants the creation of new magistrates, the tribunes of the plebs, protectors of the people's voice. Their power is small at first, but symbolic. The plebeians return to the city. their hearts still guarded but hopeful. The Republic breathes again, fragile yet alive. In the years that follow, the Senate learns a lesson it will never truly accept, that power, when shared, is not diminished, but strengthened. Yet even as the ink dries on the new laws, ambition stirs again. The patricians find ways to twist the words of justice into instruments of control. The tribunes become entangled in the same web of politics, their voices diluted by the very system meant to protect them. An old senator, Appius Claudius, writes in his journal, "The Republic endures not because we are righteous, but because the people still believe we are." His words, found centuries later, echo the heartbeat of a truth Rome could never silence. The birth of the Republic is complete. Yet even in its first breath, the seeds of its undoing have already been sown. The dawn of liberty has arrived, and with it, the slow, inevitable rise of the aristocrats who will one day lose it all. The Forum is alive again, larger, prouder, and louder than ever before. Statues of gods and generals tower over the crowds, their cold stone eyes gazing down upon a people who have traded simplicity for splendor. The Republic has grown, its borders stretched beyond the Italian hills, and with that growth, the Senate has ascended into something near divine. Marble columns rise like forests, their roots sunk deep into centuries of conquest. The air smells of incense and ambition. Merchants shout beneath the porticos, coins clatter, sandals scrape the marble. The city of Rome, once a humble republic, now feels like the heart of the world, and its senators the pulse. But within that pulse beats a contradiction. The Senate speaks endlessly of virtue, of gravitas, pietas, dignitas, the ancient values that once defined Roman greatness. They wear these words like armor, but the shine conceals the rust beneath. For behind every speech, every law, every monument lies a transaction. Virtue has become theater, and the Senate its grandest stage. In this age, orators become gods of language. Cicero rises among them, his voice carrying through the marble halls like music. He speaks of the Republic with passion and reverence. The Senate, he declares, is the mind of Rome, its reason, its conscience. The people listen, spellbound. Yet even as he speaks, others whisper, "For every voice of principle, there are 10 of deceit." The Republic is now an empire in all but name, and its wealth flows like a river of gold, from conquered lands, from slaves, from tributes. Senators return from campaigns with wagons heavy with silver and promises heavier still. They build villas across the countryside, each more extravagant than the last, their gardens blooming with foreign flowers. In their dining halls, laughter echoes over the sound of foreign tongues bound to servitude. Still, they tell themselves they are the keepers of Roman virtue. They legislate morality by day and barter influence by night. Bribes are dressed as gifts of gratitude. Corruption is called service. A senator's loyalty shifts like sand, depending on whose gold fills his hand. Cicero writes in one of his private letters, "Our republic is praised by the world, yet I fear it is dying by its own applause." Outside the Curia, the streets reflect another Rome. Beggars crouch beside marble steps. The poor live among the ruins of the rich. Veterans once promised land and honor wander the alleys like ghosts, their armor pawned for bread. And though the Senate claims to be their voice, few senators have looked into the eyes of a starving man in years. The distance between ideal and reality widens with every triumph. The people still cheer for Rome's glory, but the glory feels hollow, a bright mask over a tired face. The Senate passes decrees about virtue, about restraint, about discipline. But the words ring like empty amphorae. A chronicler of the age would later write, "They worshipped the shadow of their ancestors and called it morality." In those marble corridors, a strange silence grows, the silence that follows every great lie. Senators bow to each other, smile with studied grace, exchange words that mean nothing. Yet beneath the polished civility, everyone feels it, the uneasy knowledge that the Republic's heart is changing. The Senate, once the guardian of freedom, has become a mirror of vanity. And in that mirror, Rome no longer sees the face of the people, but the mask of its own pride. The air in the Forum grows heavy with incense and irony. The Republic still speaks the language of virtue, but no one is sure if anyone still believes it. Dawn spills across the Tiber, soft and golden, brushing the marble of the Curia Julia, the new Senate house built by Caesar's ambition. though his name has not yet echoed there. Rome stands at the height of its glory, a city draped in triumphs, and yet beneath the gold the rot deepens. In the Senate chamber, voices rise in debate, polished and rehearsed. Cicero, his toga gleaming white against the dim torchlight, addresses the assembly. His tone is calm, deliberate, every syllable shaped like a blade. If we abandon virtue, he says, then we are not Romans, but conquerors of our own decay. The senators nod, their faces solemn, but their eyes betray them, wandering toward political rivals, tallying favors owed, weighing opportunities yet to come. When the session ends, the curia empties into the Roman sunlight. There, beyond the marble steps, the crowd waits. Merchants, freedmen, beggars, soldiers. They cheer the names they know, not for policy, but for patronage. In this new Rome, every senator is both statesman and spectacle. Power depends not only on law, but on performance. Cicero knows this well. In private, his letters are filled with fatigue. I speak of virtue, he writes to Atticus, and yet I dine beside men who sell it for a coin. I defend a republic that no longer knows itself. His words, tender and brittle, are the whisper of conscience in a world that rewards cunning. For every Cicero, there is a Catiline, fierce, hungry, and desperate. Men who believe the republic's stage is theirs to set ablaze. Catiline's conspiracies fill the night air with tension. Rumors of revolt, of plots to overthrow the Senate, slither through the city like serpents in the dark. When the Senate convenes to confront him, the chamber trembles with accusation. Cicero, consul and orator, stands tall before his peers and thunders, "How long, Catiline, will you abuse our patience?" His voice echoes through the marble, striking fear and admiration in equal measure. The senators erupt in shouts, some for justice, others for self-preservation. That moment will be remembered as triumph, the Senate defending the Republic against treachery. Yet history would later whisper that Catiline's fall was not only the defeat of conspiracy, but a warning of what was to come. For each rebellion crushed, Rome grew less free. Outside, the city hums with contradiction. Gladiators train in the dust, poets recite beneath the colonnades, and soldiers march beneath banners that claim peace through conquest. The Senate celebrates its moral victory, but the triumph feels hollow. The laws they write to preserve virtue are the same laws that secure their privilege. A chronicler named Sallust, once a senator himself, writes bitterly, "The Republic had two faces, one shown to the world, the other to itself. Both were beautiful, and both were false. Within the villas of the patricians the nights are long and perfumed. Oil lamps flicker on painted walls. Laughter mingles with the soft strains of music. Beneath the warmth of wine and silk, politics unfolds in whispers. Alliances sealed not by honor, but by promise and fear. Rome's senators, those self-proclaimed guardians of virtue, have become architects of illusion. They legislate morality in daylight, then dine upon its ruins by moonlight. The Republic endures, yes, but not because it is pure. It endures because it knows how to disguise its hunger. And so the marble masks grow thicker, polished by rhetoric, hardened by power. The senators still speak the language of virtue, but the gods, it seems, have stopped listening. The winds of the future gather quietly beyond the walls, and with them, the footsteps of a man who will make the Senate's theater his own. Twilight gathers over Rome, staining the horizon a deep crimson, the color of empire, the color of blood. The city glows like an ember that refuses to die. In the heart of it, the Senate convenes again, robed in ceremony and self-importance. Beneath the gilded ceiling, voices murmur of law, of legacy, of control. Outside, the mob chants for bread. Rome has never been richer, nor its soul more fragile. Gold pours in from Spain, from Greece, from the broken kingdoms of the East. Each triumph adds another jewel to the Republic's crown, and another crack to its foundation. Senators, once content with modest estates, now measure greatness in marble courtyards and the number of slaves that attend them. The old virtues, honor, discipline, restraint, have become ornaments, polished for display but hollow to the core. Even Cicero, that voice of reason, senses the tremor in the walls. In his writings, he warns that Rome is no longer guided by law but by appetite. Our fathers conquered for duty, he laments. We conquer now for profit. It is an age of contrasts. The Forum gleams beneath torches, its statues taller, its arches grander. But beyond the light, the Subura festers in a labyrinth of poverty and crime. Here families sleep 10 to a room. Thieves whisper prayers to Mercury before every theft. From these alleys come the voices that will one day roar for revolution. Meanwhile, in the Curia, debates grow more theatrical. Speeches are crafted not for truth but for applause. Senators enter with retinues, their clients cheering like spectators at a play. Politics has become performance, and the Republic, a stage upon which men wear masks of righteousness to conceal their hunger for power. In this theater, one figure begins to rise, a young general whose fame outshines every senator's lineage. His name is Gaius Julius Caesar. Born into an ancient but fading patrician family, Caesar understands the art of masks better than any man alive. He speaks with the eloquence of Cicero, the charm of a poet, and the ambition of a god. When he walks through the forum, heads turn. When he speaks in the Senate, silence falls. The senators watch him with admiration laced with unease. They see in him both savior and storm. He flatters them, praises their wisdom, defends their traditions, even as he quietly reshapes them. Rome must be strong, he says, for the people deserve greatness. Few realize that what he truly means is Rome must be mine. Cicero, ever perceptive, writes in a private letter, "He wears the Republic as one might wear a cloak, easily removed when the season changes." Still, Caesar is not yet alone in his ambition. The Senate is filled with men like him, Pompey, Crassus, Cato, each wielding influence like a weapon, each convinced that Rome cannot survive without his hand upon the helm. They form alliances and break them with the same breath, their rivalries hidden behind smiles. Yet in these rivalries, something ancient begins to die. The Senate, once the soul of the Republic, now serves as its echo, loud, proud, and empty. On a cool evening, as torches flicker against the marble walls, a clerk records the minutes of debate. His hand trembles slightly, the ink smearing across the parchment. Later, he will write a note in the margin, a whisper from the nameless to the future. They spoke of Rome as if it were eternal, but I could see it, the cracks in their marble, the shadow on their faces. The Republic still breathes, but the air is changing. The masks of virtue are slipping. And behind them, the true faces of ambition begin to emerge, sharp, bright, and unafraid. The Senate believes it still rules, but destiny, patient and unblinking, has already chosen its next master. The Rubicon glitters beneath a cold Italian dawn. Its waters run clear, shallow, innocent, unaware that the next footstep to cross it will drown a republic. On its banks, Gaius Julius Caesar stands, his crimson cloak stirring in the wind, the breath of his legions steaming in the chill air behind him. He stares toward Rome, his city, his destiny, his battlefield. A messenger rides through the mud, breathless, desperate. He brings the Senate's final decree. Caesar must disband his army, surrender command, and return as a private citizen. The words are simple, but their weight is enormous. Obedience means humility. Defiance means civil war. Caesar reads the parchment in silence. The men around him watch, hearts hammering, knowing that history balances on the edge of this single decision. He looks up. The die, he murmurs, is cast. When his horse steps into the Rubicon, the sound is small, a splash, a ripple, but the world shifts. Behind him, thousands of soldiers move as one. Standards sway, drums thunder, and the river that once divided loyalty now becomes the passage into destiny. In Rome, panic erupts. Senators flee in carriages, scrolls tumbling from their hands, as if parchment could preserve what courage could not. The Curia stands half empty, its torches burning in vain. Pompey, once Caesar's ally and now his rival, retreats south to gather his forces. The Republic fractures like glass under the strain of fear. Cicero, watching from his villa, writes bitterly, "We have traded words for swords." The Republic's soul bleeds in silence, but to Caesar this is not treason, it is justice. He sees himself as the savior of Rome, the man chosen to restore its glory. The Senate, in his eyes, has grown decadent, corrupt, consumed by its own inertia. They speak of liberty, he tells his men, but they mean privilege. They speak of law, but they mean power. Rome deserves more than their whispers. The legions cheer his name. To them, Caesar is not a politician, but a god in motion. The man who shares their rations, marches in their dust, bleeds beside them in battle. In their hearts, the Republic is already his. As Caesar advances city by city, resistance crumbles. The Senate's decrees fade into irrelevance. Its authority dissolves in the face of momentum. The people of Rome watch with awe and fear as their future marches toward them in armor and conviction. Letters between senators reveal the dread that hangs over the Capitol. One writes, "He comes not as conqueror, but as judgment. The Republic is a candle flickering before his breath." In the Senate chamber, the remaining voices argue over whether to negotiate or resist. Each man speaks of Rome's salvation, but none agree on what Rome truly is anymore. Some see it as law, others as legacy, others still as Caesar himself. The marble walls that once echoed with reason now tremble with doubt. The Senate, proud, ancient, unyielding, finds itself powerless against a man who commands both armies and affection. And so, as Caesar crosses the threshold into Rome, the Curia's great doors stand open, not in welcome but in surrender. The senators bow their heads not out of reverence but survival. Outside, the people cheer. To them, Caesar is hope incarnate, the end of corruption, the beginning of greatness. But in the flickering light of that triumph, a darker truth glimmers. For every cheer that rises, a law dies in silence. The Republic still lives, but it no longer breathes freely. Its heartbeat belongs to Caesar now. Rome had not felt such silence in centuries. The Forum, once filled with the thunder of debate and the shouts of merchants, now listened to the steady rhythm of soldiers' boots on marble. Legionaries, disciplined and cold-eyed, lined the steps of the Senate House. Standards bearing Caesar's eagle fluttered against the wind, casting long shadows across the Curia. Inside, the senators waited, stiff, pale, uncertain. They had watched emperors of rhetoric. Now they faced an emperor of reality. The door opened and Caesar entered. No crown adorned his head, no laurel yet encircled his brow, but his presence carried the weight of inevitability. He moved not like a conqueror, but like a man stepping into his rightful home. The Senate had been the stage of Rome's greatest performances, and now it would host its final illusion. "Fathers of the Republic," he began, his voice calm, controlled, even gentle. "I come not to end your authority, but to restore it. Rome has suffered under greed and division. Together we will renew her spirit." The senators nodded, murmured assent, some even applauded, for what else could they do? The man who stood before them commanded not only armies but history itself. Caesar smiled. The soft smile of a man who knows he is feared more than loved. Outside, the city rejoiced. Bread was distributed freely, debts forgiven, games announced. Statues rose overnight in his honor, golden and triumphant. To the people he was deliverance. To the Senate, deliverance had another name: submission. Letters from Cicero during these days read like laments carved into stone. "He has conquered the Republic with kindness," he writes.
"He chains us with generosity.
"We are free, but only by his permission." And yet Caesar's brilliance cannot be denied. His reforms bring order to chaos. He strengthens the courts, reorganizes the calendar, rebuilds the ruined cities of Italy. The Republic, once stumbling beneath the weight of corruption, now marches with the precision of his legions. Even his enemies find themselves admiring the hand that grips them. But beneath the efficiency lies unease. For all his gestures of humility, for all his talk of restoring the Senate's dignity, it is clear that Rome now has one will, one vision, one man. In the Senate's records, we find the small moments, the gestures that revealed everything. When a decree was passed, senators rose to thank Caesar for his wisdom. When he entered, they stood until he sat. When he left, they watched the door close and breathed as though spared. The Republic still existed, but only in name. The laws remained, but the lawgiver had changed. As months passed, Caesar's powers grew. Consul, dictator, Pontifex Maximus. Each title wrapped around him like a thread of gold, delicate in appearance, unbreakable in truth. When some senators hesitated to grant him lifelong authority, others reminded them quietly of his legions. The vote passed without protest. One historian would later write, "They crowned him without a crown." Caesar, for his part, continued to act the part of servant. He refused the diadem when it was offered, performing humility before the crowd. "I am no king," he declared, smiling. But the smile lingered, and the people cheered too loudly, and in that moment even the gods must have seen the lie shimmering in the Roman sun. At night, the torches in the Curia burned longer. Senators whispered in corners, their words soaked in fear and memory. They spoke of liberty, of the founders, of Brutus. They spoke too of daggers, for in Rome, power is never killed and only replaced. And as Caesar's shadow lengthened across the marble floors of the Senate, some began to wonder whether liberty itself had already drawn its last breath. Winter settles upon Rome like a heavy cloak. The skies hang gray above the marble rooftops, and the Tiber moves slow and dark, carrying the whispers of a city unsure whether to celebrate or mourn. Caesar's banners fly from every arch, his likeness carved into every street corner. Yet beneath the triumph, beneath the music and the festivals, Rome breathes uneasily. The Republic, once ruled by law and debate, now moves to the rhythm of one man's heartbeat. In the Curia Julia, senators sit beneath statues of their ancestors, men who defied kings, who bled for liberty, and wonder how it came to this. The marble walls seem closer than before, the air thicker. Caesar's reforms continue, efficient and unrelenting. Grain flows, trade flourishes, armies march without dissent. And still a quiet grief lingers. Cicero writes, "He governs like a god, and yet I long for the flaws of men." Caesar's face appears on coins. His name precedes every decree. His seat in the Senate is placed higher than all others, just slightly, but enough to mark the distance between ruler and ruled. The Senate pretends not to notice, but some do. Among them are men who still carry the embers of the Republic in their hearts. Brutus, Cassius, Trebonius, and others whose names will soon become whispers of infamy and defiance. They had once loved Caesar, admired his brilliance, even served beneath his command. Yet admiration in Rome has a short life when it begins to resemble worship. Brutus writes in his journal, "If Caesar were mortal, I would forgive him." But he seeks to be eternal. Every morning the Senate gathers, the rituals of law continuing as though nothing has changed. Caesar presides, calm and composed, his words gentle yet absolute. He speaks not as a tyrant but as a father. Rome must be guided, he says. She is too vast, too glorious to drift in chaos. Few can disagree. And yet, each decree he passes pulls another thread from the fabric of the Republic. The senators applaud, because that is what they must do. But applause, when forced, becomes an elegy. Outside, the people adore him. Festivals bear his name. Poets call him the living Jupiter. Children play in the streets, shouting, "Hail Caesar," as if it were the natural greeting of Rome. And perhaps by now it is. But the Senate's nights grow longer. In shadowed chambers, beneath the flicker of oil lamps, whispers take form. What began as discontent turns into quiet conspiracy. Cassius speaks of honor. Cinna speaks of destiny. And Brutus, whose bloodline descends from the man who cast out Rome's last king, listens. A silence falls in those meetings before any word of murder is spoken. Each man feels the weight of what must come, the shame of it, the necessity of it. If we do nothing, Cassius says, we become his slaves. Brutus replies, and if we act, we may kill Rome to save her. No one answers. The lamps burn low and the smell of smoke fills the air. Above them, the stars turn slowly over Rome, the same stars that watched over kings, over consuls, over the birth of the Senate itself. The city sleeps, unaware that her fate has already been decided in whispers and candlelight. In the Curia, Caesar works late into the night, dictating letters, signing decrees, dreaming of new roads, new provinces, new glories. He believes himself the savior of Rome, and perhaps, in some way he is, but history is a circle. And in Rome every crown draws its dagger. The conspirators will not wait much longer. The Ides of March approach. Morning. Cold, pale, breathless. The city stirs beneath a gray Roman sky, the kind that blurs marble into mist and silence. The Curia of Pompey stands still, its steps slick with dew. Inside, servants sweep the floor, unaware that soon history will paint it crimson. March 15th, 44 BCE. The Ides. Caesar wakes in his house on the Via Sacra. The air feels heavy, a stillness that even power cannot command. Calpurnia, his wife, has dreamt again. In her vision, the roof collapsed above them and Caesar lay dead in her arms, his toga torn, his blood spreading like ink across the marble. She begs him not to go. "Stay home today," she whispers. "The gods are speaking." Caesar, ever the rational man, smiles faintly. The gods speak in thunder and triumph, not in dreams. Yet even he hesitates as he looks toward the window. the city below, the banners of his rule, the temples that echo his name. A knock at the door. Decimus Brutus, a friend and fellow general, enters with practiced calm. The Senate waits, Caesar. They intend to grant you new honors. If you stay home, it will look like fear. Fear, the one thing Caesar had never allowed himself. He nods, wraps himself in his crimson-edged toga, and steps into the dawn. The streets hum softly as he passes. The people bow. The sound of hooves on stone echoes between the columns. Somewhere a crow cries out. As he approaches the theater of Pompey where the Senate meets that day, the conspirators gather. Brutus, Cassius, Casca, Trebonius, names soon to be carved into infamy. Each wears the mask of loyalty, though beneath their robes the hidden steel glints coldly. They greet him as he enters. Hands touch his shoulder, his arm, his robe, gestures of respect that tremble with something darker. Caesar smiles at them all. "Fathers of Rome," he says, his voice filling the chamber. "Let us speak of the Republic." He moves to his seat, that raised chair, symbolic, solitary, and begins to unroll a document. Casca stands behind him. The air thickens. And then, a motion, sharp and desperate. The first blade pierces. Caesar gasps, twists, sees the flash of metal, the terror in Casca's face. "Villain Casca, what are you doing?" But it is too late. The room erupts into chaos. Steel flashes like lightning. Cloaks whip through the air. The senators, those same men who had once bowed to him, now surround him like wolves. Each strike is a cry of fear, of guilt, of righteousness. He stumbles, reaching out. Blood stains his toga. The floor becomes slick beneath him. He tries to rise, but another blade drives him down. Then, Brutus. Their eyes meet. For an instant, all sound seems to vanish. It too, Brute. No anger, no curse, and only disbelief. The man he had loved as a son now stands over him, trembling, his dagger dripping red. The world seems to slow. Caesar pulls his toga over his face, concealing his ruin from the eyes of the city he once ruled. He falls at the base of Pompey's statue, the conqueror dying beneath the likeness of the rival he once defeated. Silence follows. Blood pools around the senator's sandals, dark and steaming. No cheers, no cries, only the distant murmur of Rome, unaware that the Republic has just been murdered along with its master. The conspirators step back, panting, staring at what they have done. They expect relief, triumph, applause from the gods. Instead, only dread fills the air. Brutus looks at his hands, trembling. "We are free," he whispers. But his voice sounds uncertain, as if the word has already lost its meaning. Outside, a dog howls. The day darkens. Rome has been reborn and damned in a single heartbeat. The silence after the killing is unbearable. The conspirators stand frozen, their daggers wet, their breath ragged. Caesar's body lies twisted at the base of Pompey's statue, his blood running in slow rivers across the stone floor. The air smells of iron and incense. For a long moment, no one moves. Then Casca, pale and trembling, whispers, "It is done." But Brutus cannot speak. His hands shake as he lowers the blade. He had told himself it was for Rome, for liberty, for the Republic. Yet the sight before him feels less like sacrifice and more like a sin too vast for forgiveness. "Come," Cassius urges. "Let us show the people. Let them see their deliverers." They step into the sunlight, their faces streaked with blood. Swords raised high, they cry, "People of Rome, Caesar is dead. The tyrant has fallen." But the streets, once alive with cheers for Caesar, fall eerily quiet. No crowds rush forward, no garlands are thrown. The citizens stare, some in shock, some in horror, some already turning away. The conspirators had dreamed of applause. They receive silence instead. Inside their homes, families whisper. Women weep. Merchants shutter their stalls. The sound of hammering from the forges stops. Rome, for all her cruelty, knows gratitude to power, and Caesar had fed her well. At the forum, a slave drops his amphora and runs. Others begin to murmur. They've killed him. They've killed the father of Rome. By dusk, the city trembles. In the Senate house, the conspirators regroup. Brutus tries to speak, his voice breaking the thick air. He was becoming a king. "We have restored the Republic." Cassius nods, but his eyes dart toward the door as though expecting soldiers to storm in. "Then where are the people? Where are their cheers?" Trebonius answers in a whisper. "They loved him too much. Brutus turns sharply. They loved him more than Rome. We must teach them again who she is. That night, Rome becomes a city of ghosts. The lamps burn late in the homes of the elite. Servants whisper of vengeance. The smell of smoke and rain mixes in the alleys. Somewhere in the darkness, Mark Antony walks alone, the soldier, the loyal friend, the man who had feasted beside Caesar only days before. He had been held back from the Senate that morning by Trebonius, a courtesy, or perhaps a calculation. But when he enters the Curia hours later, the sight before him sears itself into his soul. Caesar's body lies uncovered, the once commanding face pale and empty, the marble floor beneath him painted red. Antony kneels. The room echoes with his breathing. He does not weep, not yet. Instead, he places his hand upon the cold shoulder of the fallen man and whispers, "You could not be ruled, only betrayed." Outside, thunder rumbles across the sky, rolling over the rooftops like the growl of the gods themselves. The conspirators, fearing the mob's fury, retreat to the Capitol Hill, barricading themselves behind its ancient walls. They call themselves liberators, though their faces betray no joy. In the city below, Antony begins to move, quietly, carefully. He sends word to loyal legions, to governors who still bear Caesar's seal. He gathers the people, not with swords, but with grief. Rome listens. Rome remembers. By morning, the Curia becomes a shrine. Flowers are placed at the doors. A crowd forms, murmuring prayers and curses alike. The conspirators' dream of liberty begins to twist into something darker, something they can no longer control. The republic, they claimed, had been reborn. But in the hearts of the Roman people, a single thought grows louder with every passing hour. Who will avenge Caesar? Dawn breaks over a restless Rome. Smoke curls above the rooftops as if the city itself mourns. The streets that once echoed with triumph now whisper with dread. The Senate House remains sealed, its marble steps still stained a dull brown from yesterday's blood. At the Forum, a crowd gathers. Merchants, soldiers, mothers, slaves. All eyes turn toward the rostra where Mark Antony now stands, his cloak heavy with grief, his face pale but unshaken. Beside him lies the body of Julius Caesar, shrouded in white linen, his wounds hidden but known to all. Antony waits for silence. It comes slowly, unwillingly, like a wound reopening. He raises his hand. "Romans!" His voice trembles at first, then hardens, carrying through the Forum. "You know me. You know the man who lies here. You have fought with him, eaten with him, marched through storms at his side. You called him father, savior, conqueror. And now he lies dead, not by the hand of an enemy, but by those he trusted most." The words fall heavy, deliberate. He does not shout. He bleeds the truth slowly, like poison. He refused no honor that you gave him. He forgave his enemies. He fed the poor, restored your lands, and called himself your servant. Was this ambition? Was this tyranny? The crowd murmurs. A woman begins to cry. A soldier clenches his jaw. Antony steps closer to the bier. "Look upon him. Here is the man they said sought to be your king." He pulls back the linen. Gasps ripple through the crowd as the wounds are revealed. 23 cuts, dark and ragged. "Behold," Antony says softly. "Here is where Casca struck. Here, Cassius, here." His voice falters. "Here fell Brutus, Caesar's angel." The crowd erupts, a storm of voices. Some cry out for vengeance, others for justice, but all cry out for Caesar. The conspirators' careful vision of liberation begins to crumble before the raw force of mourning. As Antony speaks, the people begin to tear branches from nearby trees, waving them like torches. Someone throws a cloak upon Caesar's body. Another lights it aflame. The pyre rises high and furious, its smoke dark against the pale sky. Flames consume the shroud, the air thick with the smell of burning linen and incense. And then, chaos. The crowd surges toward the homes of the conspirators, screaming their names. Brutus, Cassius, murderers. The Capitol Hill, once their refuge, now feels like a trap. They flee through alleys, disguising themselves, their noble blood now hunted by the very people they claim to free. In the midst of the riot, Antony stands silent, his face lit by the pyre. The reflection of fire dances in his eyes. He has not needed to order a single death. The mob will do what words alone could not. As night falls, Caesar's ashes are scattered by the wind, and with them, the last illusion of the old republic. For power once divided among men will now belong to those who can claim to avenge him. Antony, though triumphant in grief, feels the weight of destiny pressing upon him. He knows others will come, men who bear Caesar's blood, not his friendship. Among them, a youth barely 20, calm and cold beyond his years. His name, Gaius Octavius. The republic that Brutus dreamed of saving now lies buried beside Caesar. In its place rises something new, something darker, something inevitable. Rome no longer belongs to the Senate nor to liberty. It belongs to memory and to vengeance. The fire burns through the night, lighting the forum with a glow that feels both sacred and accursed. Above it, the statues of the old gods watch silently, as if even they cannot tell whether Caesar has ascended to join them or dragged them down with him. The morning after Caesar's funeral, Rome smelled of smoke and sorrow. Ashes drifted across the forum like snow. The marble statues, once gleaming in sunlight, now bore the gray fingerprints of the mob's rage. The Republic, the dream that had once burned so fiercely in the hearts of men, flickered now like a dying ember. The conspirators had fled. Brutus and Cassius, those self-proclaimed liberators, found themselves branded as murderers, their names spat in the streets. They had struck to save the Republic, but in their strike they had torn out its heart, and yet power abhors a vacuum. In the shadows of grief, new hands reached for the reins. Mark Antony moved first. He seized Caesar's papers, his treasury, his soldiers. With silvered tongue and soldier's resolve, he presented himself not as a ruler, but as Caesar's avenger. Rome, he declared, and will not kneel to traitors. The blood of our father cries for justice. The people roared in agreement. But far from Rome, another voice stirred, softer, younger, but destined to eclipse them all. Gaius Octavius, Caesar's grandnephew and adopted heir, received the news of his uncle's death in the coastal town of Apollonia. Barely 20, with a scholar's frame and a soldier's gaze, he sat for hours in silence before speaking a single line that would change the course of history. If the gods took him, I will avenge him. He returned to Italy under cover of mourning, not yet commanding armies, only the power of Caesar's name. When he reached Rome, Antony greeted him with suspicion, seeing only a boy. But Octavian, beneath his quiet exterior, carried the patience of a viper. He began gathering soldiers, veterans of Caesar's legions who needed no convincing. To them he was not a boy, but the living legacy of the man they worshipped. The city, meanwhile, pulsed with unease. Graffiti bloomed on the walls. Caesar lives in his air. The Senate tried to reassert control, but the chamber felt hollow, its speeches empty, its authority withered. The Republic was a ghost now, haunting its own monuments. In private meetings, senators whispered of compromise. Antony had the mob, Octavian had the name, and neither seemed likely to bow. So they did what Romans always did in times of crisis. They tried to balance chaos with alliance. A meeting was arranged. Antony, Octavian, and Marcus Lepidus, Caesar's old master of horse, met beyond the city walls. 3 men bound not by friendship, but by necessity. The second triumvirate was born not from ambition alone, but from fear. Fear of the people, of each other, of the Republic's ashes still smoldering beneath their feet. That night, they signed their pact. And as wax cooled upon the seals, the future of Rome hardened with it. Their first act was not to rebuild the Republic, it was to cleanse it. Lists were drawn, names written in neat Roman script, senators, nobles, rivals, orators, anyone who might challenge their rule. Cicero's name appeared among the first. When soldiers came for him, Cicero did not flee. He had seen too much of Rome to fear her end. I die for freedom, he said simply. His hands were severed, his tongue nailed to the rostra, the symbol of the Republic silenced by the state it once guided. The forum echoed no longer with debate, but with executions. And yet in that horror, the Republic's final truth revealed itself. It had not been killed by one man's ambition, but by the collective hunger of men who feared to lose power. As the fires of vengeance spread, Octavian watched quietly. He let Antony command the mobs, let Lepidus command the armies. He learned their tempers, their pride, their flaws. He smiled when they boasted, bowed when they schemed. But behind those calm eyes, the heir of Caesar was already plotting something greater, something eternal. Rome was bleeding, but in its blood Octavian saw a new dawn. The streets of Rome were filled with smoke and fear. Yet beneath the terror, a strange rhythm began to take hold. Antony, intoxicated with power and grief, gave grand speeches over the forum, stirring the people into frenzy. Octavian, patient and measured, moved silently, gathering support among the legions, whispering loyalty, promising legacy. The city became a stage for ambition, the Republic its unwilling audience. Senators attempted to reclaim authority, but their voices fell flat. The marble walls that once echoed their reason now seemed to absorb their words, letting them vanish into the cold, indifferent air. Every decree they issued was ignored. Every plea for order met with mockery or violence. The Republic's structures remained, but the life within them had drained away. Antony and Octavian's alliance held, fragile and tense, bound only by fear of each other. The triumvirate's power was absolute. Their list of enemies, long and precise, left no room for dissent. Families of senators disappeared in the night. Estates burned, property seized. Rome became a city of whispers, of shadows flitting between torches, of lives erased by decree. Yet Octavian remained calm. He did not need to shout or command. The memory of Caesar's name sufficed. Soldiers who had marched under Caesar's banners recognized his air, obeyed him silently, almost reverently. Even Antony, flamboyant and impatient, began to notice the young man's subtle influence, his ability to bend loyalty without force. In private, Octavian strategized. He observed Antony's arrogance, Lepidus's weakness, the Senate's impotence. Rome, he understood, could be ruled not only with armies but with perception. Power, once absolute, required patience to consolidate. One wrong move could ignite civil war anew. Meanwhile, the people mourned, celebrated, feared, all at once. Caesar's memory became a weapon, wielded by both Antony and Octavian. Public funerals, statues, festivals, every act of loyalty to the dead reinforced obedience to the living. The Republic's ideals were invoked constantly, yet every invocation reminded Rome of what it had lost. The Senate, demoralized and fearful, began to crumble from within. Tribunes, consuls, magistrates, men who had once wielded authority with pride, now walked in shadow, careful with words, careful with gestures, careful with thought itself. Liberty, once tangible, became a memory, fragrant but intangible like smoke in a temple. Octavian's genius was not in conquest alone, but in patience. While Antony paraded power and indulged in rhetoric and excess, Octavian built loyalty quietly. He studied every soldier, every commander, every citizen with a calculating gaze. The city believed it saw Antony's strength, but in truth, Octavian's reach already touched more hearts and hands than anyone suspected. By the winter of the second year after Caesar's death, Antony and Octavian's tension was visible. Publicly allied, privately wary, their triumvirate began to show cracks. Lepidus, impotent and irrelevant, faded into obscurity. Octavian's careful patience ensured that when the time came, he alone would strike. In Rome, monuments rose to Caesar. Streets echoed his name. Festivals, games, and triumphs honored the man who had died to preserve the Republic. And yet the Republic itself was gone, buried beneath vengeance, ambition, and the cunning patience of a boy destined to become emperor. History, in those months, shifted its axis. One city, once the cradle of liberty, became the birthplace of empire. Marble steps, once climbed by the voices of free men, now bore only the echo of commands. The people cheered. The armies obeyed. The Senate remained. But Rome's soul had been irrevocably transformed. In the shadows of triumph, Octavian smiled. The Republic that Brutus and the other conspirators had tried to save would never rise again. Liberty, fragile and fleeting, had been extinguished by those sworn to protect it. And yet out of its ashes Rome would endure, reshaped, absolute, eternal. The sun sets over Rome, blood-red and relentless, as if the heavens themselves mourn the Republic's passing. Marble columns glow faintly in the dying light, their shadows long and distorted, stretching across streets now ruled by fear and loyalty to a single name. The air carries the scent of ash, sweat, and incense, a mixture that clings to the city like memory itself. Octavian stands on the Palatine Hill, gazing down at the Forum. The statues of Caesar, once mere marble, now feel alive, icons of a legacy he will claim, manipulate, and extend. Antony celebrates openly, yet the young heir watches quietly, measuring, calculating, knowing that the ultimate power will be claimed not through chaos, But through patience, precision, and the loyalty of those who see in him the promise of Caesar reborn, the Republic is gone. Its laws remain, its Senate remains, but its spirit has been extinguished. Rome now breathes to the rhythm of ambition, vengeance, and the cunning of men who understand that history favors the patient. Cicero's voice has been silenced, Brutus and Cassius exiled or plotting from afar, and yet the city moves, still magnificent, still dangerous, still waiting. And in that waiting, the threads of Rome's next great destiny begin to stir. From the shadows of distant lands, from the battles and triumphs yet to come, a family emerges. One whose shields will protect the city in times when the Republic's failures are written across the battlefield in fire and blood. They will fight a war that will test Rome itself, against an enemy whose name will echo through centuries. But for now, the city sleeps uneasy, haunted by the ghost of its own liberty, unaware that the next chapter of its story is already taking shape. The flames of ambition burn long into the night, casting their glow on the marble of the Forum, and in that glow, one truth is clear: Rome survives not because of freedom, but because of the men who will defend it, and the families whose courage will shape its fate. If you thought the Republic's fall was the end, wait until you see how Rome rises again, shielded by the valor of one legendary family who dared to face history's greatest threat. And if you want to follow the next chapter of Rome's story, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell, because the story is far from over.